I don't know who this user is. I'm sure they are doing amazing content on YouTube. As a matter of fact, this video is amazing. It's a 300,000 view video. So that means that it's doing something. So the reason why I am looking at it, YouTube gives me a lot of analytics to tell me, okay, V, your viewers are watching this other stuff at the same time. Only 10,000 likes? We can't see the dislikes. But to be honest, like, likes are probably at best like a 5% ratio. So what, 10,000 likes to a 300,000 view video, is that 3%? So it's very difficult to break like that many interactions. Like that many people are going to click a second thing, and most people don't do that. Yo, Ben, this video might be important for you to see, so definitely buckle up, buddy, buckle up. Ben Star's the dev for Revita, by the way. If any of you all don't have Revita yet, go wishlist the game ASAP. I can even show you how to do it. You go to Steam, you go to Roguelite, my algorithm is screwed up. You go to Revita. I'm not logged in, but pretend I am logged in and I'm clicking either the buy button or the wishlist button, which I guess I have to sign into wishlist. All right. So anyway, 300,000 views. People are watching this for some reason. Let's find out. How are roguelikes hurting other genres? Pogo Bro, let's hear your story.
Okay, so this video might be a bit of an overreaction. You see,
now that's always like a cool way to start a video, is to admit you are overreacting.
Hyper Light Drifter is in my top 10 games of all time. Maybe even top 5, depending on the day. And a lot of
Did you all see those games?
Games
I wonder if this is really their top 5 list.
Maybe.
Cuphead, Hollow Knight, Sekiro. Like, these, by far, easy top 10s for most people. Ultra Kill, I have like 1 hour in Ultra Kill. I'm not saying it's a bad game, but it's not really clicking for me. Not yet. Do you all know Ultra Kill? Do I have anyone in my chat where Ultra Kill is like a top 10 game for you?
Even top 5, depending on the day. And a lot of that has to do with the way its level design always feels fresh and unique, with plenty of landmarks to help guide your way.
There's a game that came out recently that's
was announced
got
recently,
similar
so
control scheme.
And then we learned that it's going from 2D to 3D cell shaded. And it's going to be a 4-player co-op game with randomized, procedurally generated levels.
Okay. So, what other game did something similar to this? Risk of Rain, going from Risk of Rain 1 to 2. Old Risk of Rain, let's see what that looks like. Can you even buy old Risk of Rain? Old Risk of Rain. Not a terrible game, I will say that. New Risk of Rain. What's like a good trailer? Shoutouts to Gearbox. Yeah, I guess we don't have like a straight gameplay trailer. It's a little unfortunate. Like, the game's kind of old at this point, so maybe that stuff is gone. But you all know what this game is, right? So it's to call it an upgrade from the first game, maybe like sort of disingenuous. Like, it is a real upgrade. I mean, it's literally going from 2D to 3D, but that's That's as much to say that like Mario Odyssey is an upgrade to Super Mario World. And to a lot of people still play Super Mario World, right? People are still playing Link to the Past. And like, does that mean that Breath of the Wild is like the better version of Link to the Past? No. So for Hyper Light Drifter to become Hyper Light Breaker, I think is the new game. That's not to say that like Hyper Light Drifter is bad and needs to be upgraded into Breaker. It may be a situation of like a Breath of the Wild coming from Link to the Past. It's just this is like the new direction of the game, but the other direction is still like it's still there. You can still play it.
Disgusted and appalled reaction to this news, we need to take a look at something that has been annoying me about the gaming industry for some time. A trend that has become popularized in no small amount due to the roguelite, roguelike, rogue who gives a f what the last part is, you know what I mean, genre. This is not a video about me saying roguelites are trash, and
any intelligent gamer wouldn't waste their time on it.
On the contrary, many of my favorite indie games are inside that genre. Another thing to note is that this
discussion it's pretty interesting how we can't tell who really started it, but at some point, roguelike, especially action versions of those games, just took off. And we went from playing games where, like Hyper Light Drifter, where it's like, here's a world, just get from point A to point Z, and probably don't play the game again, to Isaac, Hades, Dead Cells. Play the game over and over and over again. Hopefully you're getting progress. If you're not getting progress, it's sad.
Another thing to note is that this discussion is more focused on action-based
but you're
roguelikes.
still gonna play it because you really want to see progress.
Building roguelikes are safe. I want to take a look at some of these games that really work for me and why their approach to randomized proc gen levels work. And then look at some ones that
Is that Dead Cells music in the background? Can you all hear that?
Didn't work for me in that same area. Starting with the daddy of them all, the one that put this genre onto the mainstream map for most people, The Binding of Isaac. This game came from the idea of wanting old school Zelda dungeons that never end. What we got was kinda like that, except the combat.
Now remember, Binding of Isaac started off as like a Flash game. So like maybe it wasn't this from the very beginning, but Ed had a vision and turned into this.
Is twin stick shooterish, and it's not as puzzle heavy as a Zelda dungeon tends to be. Regardless, this game has randomized levels to a degree. Each level or floor is made up of a bunch of rooms pulled randomly from a pool that are placed in any random order. Some rooms.
So unlike Dead Cells, where there's like platforms and the platforms fit into each other, and then there's rules that decide like how much can fit in a single square. In Isaac, each square is like already made, and then there might still be rules as to what kind of monsters are allowed into each room. I think that's it. And then the rewards. I don't know if there's any more sophistication than that, but I'm not an Isaac guy, so what do I know?
Some are small, some are large, but each always has minor or major differences in one way or another. Some rooms have spike traps that try to pin you to the wall. Some have statues that constantly tug you towards them. Others are full of pits or explosives with narrow walkways. And the thing about these rooms is usually the enemies in them tend to work off of what the layout of the room is.
I mean, that's probably true to some degree, but I've seen some nasty setups where I had like flies in this room right here. Oh my god, YouTube, please.
Tug you towards them. Others are full of pits or explosives with narrow walkways. And the thing about these rooms is usually the enemy.
Like, I swear I've had rooms like this that's like worse plus flies. Which means that the flies can go over the rocks. I can't shoot them until they're basically on top of me. So, while there's probably some rules as to what degree of monster can be in here, I wouldn't be surprised if any monster can kind of be in here, so long as it's not meeting some kind of threshold. Who was that? Anzia with the Prime, 4 months. Thank you for that. 2 more and you will be a Swift Sword, I believe.
And them tend to work off of what the layout of the room is. For example, rooms with explosive barrels or narrow walkways will have enemies that have AoE attacks to really make you feel cramped. Rooms with obstacles in the center might have flies that chase you in circles and keep you constantly on the move. This sort of design requires the dev to actively create each room. They didn't just
yeah, I 100% agree that the room itself is made by design, but I swear these monsters are random.
A bunch of assets, throw it into a prog-gen machine, and then call it a game. The floor design is random, but each room is like a mini level for the players to solve.
Thank you, Sai.
This next game's approach is slightly similar, but at the same time a bit different. One of my all-time favorite roguelikes is the bullet hell Enter the Gungeon. And it might not seem like it at first, but
a lot of people like Gungeon, and I like it. I just don't get the same satisfaction when I play the game, I think. And I think it has something to do with where I am in the game, and I look at other streamers play it, and it's like night and day. Same thing with Isaac. Like, people's Isaac runs look nothing like my runs, and it makes me, I guess, feel some kind of way about it.
Gungeon's floors are designed in
Jealousy,
a similar
maybe?
process to Isaac. Each floor is randomized, but the rooms on each floor are pulled from a pool of thoughtfully crafted encounters.
Thoughtfully crafted. You gotta use your brain.
The thing about Gungeon is the combat is much faster paced.
But, like, is this room thoughtfully crafted? Is it not 3 explosive barrels and 2 bulletkin? The bulletkin really don't do anything. Now, you could say, oh, well, V, that's because this room is like a tutorial room. This is in Area 1, where the bulletkin are, like, really the basic zombie of the game. So of course it's not going to be any more sophisticated than this. But I would say I wouldn't call that like sophisticatedly crafted. It's just, here's, like, think about the different levels of monsters allowed to be in a certain area. Here's a room that is well designed. I made a hallway with barrels. And then the only thing allowed to be in it are basic zombies. That's as much thought, I'm sure, that goes into it. Ben, now the rooms are all fully hand designed, just the order is randomized pretty much. In the case of Isaac, that is, doesn't mean they're all well designed.
And more difficult.
I think the devs, yourself included, has seen every room layout. Like, sure, there might be outliers that might have like a fine tune. Hey, this enemy, if it spawns in this room, ends up like on a tiny ledge that is unreachable by the bullet from the player. So that monster will have to be banned from this room, because if it ever spawns there, then the player gets like a bad experience. But I assume that is few and far between. And to be honest, if that happens in my game, that the room had random monster layout and it was terrible, I don't know if I would report it. That's the jank that I kind of like in games, where like I kind of want it to be a little bit screwed up.
Rooms are designed to be larger, have more empty space,
Blaze,
and
good
the
to see you.
hazards are placed with your iframe dodge roll in mind. The floors never last too long, and one of the best parts of Gungeon, the boss fights, happen at the end of each floor. The randomization.
The best part of Gungeon is that the boss fights happen at the end of each floor. Let's keep that in mind for later. Sorry, generate randomized does not mean it's not thoughtfully crafted. True. Because there's formulas that go in there. Like, I cannot have a 500-point mini boss spawn in this room in the beginning of the game. The room is only allowed 10 points total. Bulletkin are like 0.5 points. This little dice guy, this thing's like 2 points. And then like what's the name of the Iron Maiden? The Iron Maiden is like 5 points by itself.
Both of these games work so well because you can still see the level design at work. It's just at a much smaller scale than most other games. And last,
you can still see the level design at work.
Now we get to a game that doesn't really work for me. It's not a bad.
Let's catch up the chat a little bit. They do have a point in the fact that hand designed rooms allows you to design specific environments. Even a simple room like 3 barrels with a few enemies allows for design space, which you usually don't have with pure randomness. Again, that doesn't mean that all of them are perfect. I don't know if anyone's doing pure randomness. If someone was to show me a game where it's proc gen, fully random, where any boss, well, any enemy in the roster can spawn that's not a mini boss, and the proc gen is completely random, so that means that the tiles might be in like terrible positions. I don't know if it's a good game. So I don't think a lot of them exist, and I don't think they do very well. Minecraft is pretty close to that, but I think Minecraft, how do I want to say it? So I don't want to say that Minecraft doesn't care. I feel as though most players who are playing Minecraft and see like Slender Man underneath your house or something, that's the game. It's literally the game. I don't know if that's like bad. It's probably not good, like in terms for any other video game, but for Minecraft specifically, I think it works.
In fact, even though I have problems with it, I have to admit it's a good game for what it does. It just doesn't work for me. And that's Dead Cells. I don't have the time to fully explain why it doesn't work for me, but one of the main reasons are the levels. Because unlike Gungeon or Isaac, Dead Cells puts zero effort into designing them.
Zero effort when it comes to designing levels. Let's keep that in mind for later. None of them are pure random, but getting to the level of it feeling like handcrafted is a lot more difficult, and usually shortcuts are taken, which ends up leading to lesser results. Be fair, there aren't even a lot of roguelites that fall under proc gen room layouts. Most of the big ones all have hand designed rooms. So Ben, you're saying that Dead Cells has hand designed rooms.
I don't have the time to fully explain why it doesn't work for me, but one of the main reasons are the levels. Because unlike Gungeon or Isaac, Dead Cells puts zero effort into designing them.
Hand designed rooms with zero effort.
It's literally just a bunch of platform, door, and wall assets that they then throw into a proc gen machine, and whatever spews out they spam some enemies onto and call it a day.
Okay. So from like the highest level, like tippity top, you don't play any video games at all. Maybe you're an artist. Maybe you're like a working person who's not a gamer apparently. If you see this like section right here, if you were to say this is a handful of platforms with enemies on them,
it's literally just a bunch of...
Like, that's not wrong. But you can say that about any game, right? Even like the Gungeon example that they gave, where it's handcrafted, designed for your dodge roll in mind. It's basically, here's a box with a couple of holes. The hole is big enough that you can dodge roll over it, in the same way as this platform is high enough that you can wall climb, or if you don't have wall climb, you use the rope. So it's not like genius, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think... That's not Devolver. I mean, I know Devolver published it, but I don't know who the dev is for Into the Gungeon. It's a box with like stuff. Same thing with Isaac. It's a box with some stuff in it. For Dead Cells, it's a tile that's fit together so that you can go from A to B, and it has to have a route to go from A to B with monsters.
Platform, door, and wall assets that they then throw into a proc gen machine, and whatever spews out they spam some enemies onto and call it a day. For many people, that doesn't matter. The combat in Dead Cells is so good to them that that's all they need from the game. And that's totally fair. But it doesn't work for me. In order for combat to be engaging, I have to feel some kind of handcrafted encounter design, because then it feels like there's a reason for the fight to take place at all.
Okay.
In Dead Cells, you have to
So looking at this Sekiro example. So it's so hard to compare a Soulsborne to something like a Dead Cells or a Hades or anything else, because in a Soulsborne, each individual monster needs to have like stark differences between the two. In Dead Cells, you start off with zombies. The zombies don't go away until you go up in difficulty. Soulsborns don't have that luxury. The difficulty is probably just how far you are from the spawn. So this encounter here, which is in like the first sleeping world of Sekiro, this is like, it's not super far from the beginning, but it's a little bit off path and then directly forward. You have to go through a bunch of plebs. All these are plebs, just like a green zombie in Dead Cells. Of course, these are harder because it's a Soulsborne. They're designed to kill you until you figure out how to kill them.
Then it feels like there's
and then you fight a mini boss. The mini boss has a door behind it that you basically can't get through, a fog wall, if you will. You can't get through the fog wall until you beat the boss.
Fight to take.
A lot of Soulsborns have that. A lot of roguelites do not have that in general. I don't know what Hyperlight Drifter does. And then Into the Gungeon just has actual monsters that you have to clear in the room.
Place at all. In Dead Cells, you have to.
Dead Cells doesn't have that. Because keep in mind, Dead Cells is also a Metroidvania. So you could skip all of this if you wanted to. But the reason why you don't is because these have stuff. And like the overall goal outside of winning is to unlock things. I don't know if you do that in Gungeon. In Gungeon, you just collect currency. And then at the end of the game, you spend your currency at the actual shop. You don't find blueprints in Gungeon, right? Does anyone know why if you find blueprints and if you don't? In Revita, there are achievements. So there may be, like, you have to do a certain kind of kill or find certain stuff, plus get currency, and then you unlock based off of an achievement that you've gotten. Isaac has a little bit of that. I feel like not a ton, but obviously it does have a ton of achievements. Seems like he doesn't want to play a roguelite, which is totally cool, but they're a big fan of Gungeon. So that's, I think, our comparison point here.
Slog through 3 whole levels of this complete proc-gen design before you get to a boss fight. And these levels are long if you explore them fully. And that's why I think roguelikes have been hurting game design as a whole.
Alright. So that was, again, one of the thoughts that we have to keep in mind. Into the Gungeon has bosses after every biome. Dead Cells has a boss after every... Well, it's 3, and then 2, and then 1. So what they're saying is that you have a long slog through all the levels, 1, 2, and 3, before you fight anything cool, I assume. Which is not wrong, but it's tough because if you don't do anything at all, then the game's probably not for you. And that goes with any other game. The only difference is that roguelites like your Isaacs, your Hades, Revita, all of those, like Gungeon as well, you're forced to kill this stuff. So while the biome isn't as long, most likely, but you have to fight everything. So probably by the time you got through Promenade is probably about the time it takes for you to get through the first biome of Into the Gungeon, I'd imagine.
Because randomized level and proc-gen are a way for developers to be lazy. Are the Dead Cells devs lazy? Of course not. They are constantly pumping out content for this game.
Those are strong words. Holy crap.
But the crazy work they are doing to the game is due in large part because they can just ignore the handcrafted stuff.
You're telling me nothing in this is handcrafted? No.
Dead Cells devs lazy? Of course.
Hang on. So Queen in the Sea. A boss that takes place in a tower where there are barriers that can be dodge rolled through or rope to be climbed to get through the boss. Is that not handcrafted? This is just a box. It does have like holes on both sides, but to be fair, like what boss in any of the roguelikes that we play are not a boss that's in a box? Hades, every single one is a boss in a box except for Hydra, which is a box that has lava. Into the Gungeon, there are specific bosses that have specific things that are probably similar to this. Now, they say that Into the Gungeon is handcrafted. This is apparently not. Fatal Falls. This map, Fractured Shrine, is set up in a specific fashion. It's an X, where one side leads to a shop, one side leads to a different shop, one side leads to streamer room, one side leads to a lore room. And then the path to get there, if it's not at least somewhat formulated, it's gonna be really, really hard to get through because there are traps, spikes, shuriken, as well as the enemies themselves. Scarecrow, I would like to call it handcrafted. I mean, I know I've died to Scarecrow in some really bad ways, but this is a pretty decently well-made encounter, I think. They actually fixed Undying Shore. When it first came out, it was a little boring, I guess. It was kind of like a straightaway, like, yeah, it zigzagged, but the zigzags didn't have any cool rooms to them. So they eventually went back and did that. Catch up and chat a little bit. Completely ignores that doing procedural generation is harder than just making static biomes. We did touch on that a little bit. Like, it has to have some sort of formula to it, or else it's going to be A, broken, or B, so difficult that no one's gonna want to do it. You have to animate pixel models. Yeah, I'm gonna assume that they aren't talking about the art. I assume it's purely level design and not from like, what does the art look like?
Of course not. They are constantly pumping out content for this game, with another 2-year roadmap to work from. But the crazy work they are doing to the game is due in large part because they can just ignore the handcrafted stuff.
Honestly, I think Bad Seed should be their favorite expansion. Because Bad Seed, this biome, Moras, has mini bosses that pause the gameplay. And they were saying that like the best part about Gungeon is that after every biome you have a boss to fight. And this is the closest thing we have to that in Dead Cells, where before you can proceed, you have to pass a check. And the check is the ticks here. Like, I can admit that the checks aren't the best that they could come up with. It may be because they don't want a Hand the King in the middle of Forgotten Sepulchre or, trying to think of another awful biome. I think Sepulchre is probably the best example. Let's imagine that before you go into Sepulchre, you have to fight a boss. And then after Sepulchre, you have to fight a boss, which you already do. And then after that, you have to fight a boss, which you already do. It's really just the first 3 biomes. That's the only issue. So it's like after Prison Quarters, you have to fight something. After Promenade, you have to fight something. I'm not gonna say I don't want it, but I think they're asking for a little bit that they would get and probably not like.
People love its combat so much that they can get away with not hand designing encounters, or only making one new boss every
9 total bosses is a really low number for a roguelite. There's people who straight up don't go to certain bosses.
year. Because they can be lazy in the level design department, that means they can spend that.
Now, okay. I will say that we are a little bit trying to think of a good word for it. We're a little spoiled from other games that have like 50 bosses to them. But when you look at Hades, Hades has the same amount of bosses. And people love that game. As a matter of fact, I think they will say that they're a big fan of Hades, as a matter of fact.
That time developing their other systems more. So why is this a problem if Dead Cells is an overwhelmingly popular title? Because it's starting to leak into other genre-adjacent and completely different games. Look at the recently released...
Hades is a bad example? Are you saying that Hades is a good way to have less bosses? When you have 50 bosses, 45 feel like recolors? I think when it comes to something like Binding of Isaac, you have, let's take like 10 bosses. In the first area, you have like Boombo, you have the little red cherry fly that like shoots backwards. You have poop bosses and all kinds of other stuff. Like if you have just one boss per like monster type, probably not that difficult to do. It's just that I feel like Dead Cells is a little different because you want to build towards the boss. Like you can't build towards an Isaac boss or a Gungeon boss. Like there's no, and correct me if I'm wrong, by the way, I don't think there's a boss in Gungeon that is immune to stun. So you purposely chose not to build into stun and you built into freeze instead, or root instead. Or perhaps a boss that is very hard to hit with ranged attacks. So you decided to build your Gungeon character as a melee character. That way you're able to fight whatever melee-centric bosses there are. I don't think that exists in those games. Low number of bosses makes you learn the boss pattern, focusing more on those 9 bosses. Yeah, I think that's more of the Soulsborne aspect of it. Because if you look at it, Dead Cells, first off, is like a Metroidvania. Oh, you can't see what all the things are? Oh, you kind of can. So, like, it's an action roguelite, but the Metroidvania is a big part of it. And then for, I think, the boss portion, I think there's a little bit of Soulsborne in there, where there's, like, specific bosses and you're learning patterns. And I think that's, like, a detail that isn't in, I mean, it is in other games, like Revita is a good example, where the bosses have specific attack patterns, and whatever you built, you're gonna be able to fight the boss. Like, it always has ways for you to interact with it, but eventually you have to learn the patterns. I think Gungeon has a little bit of that.
I have a ton of praise for this game. They did an amazing job designing a system where you manage a cult sim and build your base from the ground up.
So now they're saying this is how roguelites are like destroying the other genres.
However, the huge downside to this is that they got lazy on the level design side of things. The other half of the game has you going out on runs through randomly generated levels that are very similar to the Binding of Isaac, with one key difference. While the floors do pull from a pool of rooms, the rooms themselves have like no design. It's mostly just square room with rocks or grass in the middle. And so
now this isn't wrong. The only thing I would say about this is that Isaac started off as a Flash game and has gone through multitudes of updates. And this is release Cult of the Lamb. And you all know nowadays, like, a release roguelite is never where the roguelike stands. Except for Hades. Hades is the only one who never really went back and did anything. They still could, but I'm not holding my breath. But they're not wrong. Like, it is a box with some resources and monsters to kill. The only thing I would say here is that, considering the people who are going to be playing this game based off of how it was advertised, it is also advertised as a cult sim. And some people who do cozy game content suggest Cult of the Lamb as a cozy game. So if you go too far into the roguelite portion, then I don't think it's going to be advertised accurately for the people who expected cozy game. And if you go too hard on the cozy part, then the people who bought it for the roguelite portion are also not going to enjoy that. So I think there's a fine balance. Could it be better? Absolutely. But I think they can't go all in on the roguelite.
Some enemies to hack away at. I can think of
Thank
like
you,
two
Slimyy.
instances where the rooms had some traps in them, and even then they didn't add anything to the encounters, because the encounters themselves are just random pools of enemies. In order for this
Yes, I think most roguelites, the encounters are random pools of enemies. I think that's correct.
part of the game to be engaging, at least one aspect of it needs to be complex. If the combat system is simple, the enemies and level design needs to be made more complex to be interesting, and vice versa. Isaac combat is simple, the rooms and enemy positions make it interesting. The flip side is Gungeon.
Wait, hang on?
Isaac combat is simple, the
Yeah, Isaac combat is simple, I
rooms
agree.
and enemy positions make it interesting.
Yeah, I guess I can agree with that. Like, I guess what makes Isaac hard is I feel like I'm in an unbeatable setup where it's like these all explode, the room is incredibly small. How am I supposed to get through this without taking damage?
The flip side is Gungeon, the enemies in combat are complex, so the level design can be more simple, but still crafted.
I don't get that. They're all crafted to some degree, but I'm a simple guy. Everything's a box to me. If it doesn't have like some sort of hazards in it, it's just a box.
In Cult of the Lamb, both aspects are extremely simple, making the overall experience of the roguelike runs to be boring. This is the exact thing we don't want, giving devs
Now,
a way
what I
to
can
shortcut
say is that I do wish, and I do play this on hard mode, not the hardest mode, but I did play this on hard mode. I did die a couple of times on the bosses. I think there is a point where the actual biomes are hard. But could it have been done better? Absolutely. I worry that if it was any harder or any more complex, then the people who bought it as a cozy game are going to give it negative reviews. That's my only issue.
If you are not going to put effort into carefully crafting your systems to interact properly,
I actually really like this enemy. I think this is the one that buffs enemies around you, and then there's another bishop that teleports and fires fireballs.
then just don't have them. Cult of the Lamb would have been so much better if it was just boss fights, and you could skip the whole randomized level aspect. Dead Cells would
You can't, because the roguelite is also where you get resources. So it's a very interesting system. So when you go into a dungeon in Cult of the Lamb, you're also spending time, which is going to get your cult negatively impacted. You're going in there not just to kill a boss, you're going in there to also get quests completed. Like, your actual cult members are literally telling you to go in there and get me some mushrooms. I want to make a mushroom bouquet for my love, Yarzi, and we're gonna get married. That's how the game works. So you go in, you fight some stuff, you get some wood, you get some money, you get some blueprints, and then you leave. If it's just the boss, then that removes that like exploration factor. And remember, when you think about other cozy games, your Stardew Valleys, your Harvestella, for the one person in my chat who actually bought Harvestella, like, all of those games have like a dungeon portion to it where you do stuff and then you bring stuff back into your camp. Why is it not the same when it comes to Cult of the Lamb?
would be a much tighter experience for me.
And sorry about missing chat, by the way. I see stuff, but I'm already like verbal diarrhea, like someone said earlier. I'm already just spewing, and like by the time I want to read the chat, it's already flown by. I apologize. In Mario, you should just skip to Bowser straight up. That's how people play Mario 64. Where you go and how you fight in the dungeon, and then you have the cozy gameplay. That's, I think, what you want to do in Cult, and you don't want to make it any more complicated.
If it was room-by-room combat with thoughtful encounter design. Although that might be a debatable opinion, let me know what you think. Dead Cells does get a pass.
Okay, so that's a very important detail right there. So they were saying that Dead Cells could have been good to them if it was like room-by-room combat. Think Gungeon, Revita, Isaac, etc. Here's a box, fight in the box. Once you're done, you spawn in a new box. But Dead Cells is also a Metroidvania where you find rooms for double jump and down slam. You explore to go into hidden areas to find blueprints, run to a shop, find a random curse chest. Like, I think the platforming was an important detail in the game, as well as how you fight, because fighting is also platform dependent.
That's because the combat is complex enough that they can get away with it. Cult of the Lamb's combat is not that at all.
Okay, I'll admit, Cult of the Lamb's combat is pretty one-dimensional. Like, there's a couple of spells in there that are actually very cool. Like, there's one that freezes, there's one that charms, there's curses, there's poison. But for the most part, if you get anything, you'll probably kill. And I know that's like a forehead V. Yes, if you get anything, you'll probably kill the enemy and probably win. And remember, Dead Cells has like a long laundry list of updates for its weapons. So I'd say it's probably thinking like it's Hades with no aspects. That's probably what Cult of the Lamb feels like.
And now we get to the meat of this video. The reason that
room by room would kill Dead Cells speed. I did see a comment down here where someone said that Dead Cells literally gives you a speed boost because they want that kind of gameplay. I'm kind of in agreement with it.
Overreacting so much.
Kinda.
The reason my Dead Cells take is so bad. Because look what they did to my boy. Hyperlight Drifter has some of the most memorable set pieces and level design I can think of. Every area has a unique theme. Every secret has a well-designed hint.
I think this is unfair.
Boy.
Like, if this is literally the development tool, like if this is just Unreal Engine or Godot, is it fair to say that this is like trash? They're literally in the program to build it. Is that right?
Hyperlight Drifter has some of the most memorable set pieces and level design I can think of. Every area has a unique theme. Every secret has a well-designed hint. The combat encounters are all handcrafted. Why on earth would you make a sequel that throws all of that out? It's
Take a shot every time they say handcrafted.
Might be a good game, but it won't be a good sequel to Drifter. This is one of the more obvious cases of a company using the name of their previous game to build interest. It's sequel bait, like taking the name Star Wars and then totally twisting it and misrepresenting what that series was about.
I'm not touching this one. All yours, chat. All yours.
Just to make money.
I have no comment.
Heart Machine just make a 3D co-op PvE melee game with randomized and procedurally generated levels in another setting with a new IP? Because money. They want the players of the original game playing this one.
But no. All right. Top concurrent games, Steam. Risk of Rain. I don't know. I think the game's good. Now, of course, this is to say that if you were a big fan of Risk of Rain 1, and what you didn't get, this is the best example I can give you all. So, I played a lot of Final Fantasy 11. From high school, that's the MMO for Final Fantasy. Came out in like 2002, 2003. I played that game. That was really my first career game that I got into. And when Final Fantasy 14 came out, I was a big hater. Like, massive hater. Just haterade flowing through my blood. And a lot of my other fellow FF11 players were in the same boat. All they wanted was FF11 2, and we never got it. But if you were to search out how many subscribers are playing FF14 compared to those playing FF11, it's thousandfold. So it could be that perhaps the newer game hits a lot more boxes for a lot more people than little old me who wants Final Fantasy 11-2. And for all I know, if they made Final Fantasy 11-2, it would have been trash. And to be fair, Yoshi P, they did that. They actually made an area called Diadem, I think it is. Diadem, or whatever, Beelzebub or something, whatever the new name of it is, in Final Fantasy 14, where you grind equipment and levels. Eureka, that's one too, thank you. Or it was literally Eureka. You grind just like an old school MMO, and people did it for a little while, but it was probably one of the least well-received content in Final Fantasy 14. And it was FF11-2, basically, in 14's engine. So I think we don't know what's good. I trust the dev who made a fantastic product. I guess I don't trust Square Enix, but I trust the dev to make a good product.
IP because money. They want the players of the original game playing this one. Making a mid-tier in the Shadow of the Colossus game does that to a company, I guess. No matter whether Breaker is good or bad, I will never be okay with this absolute gutting of what makes the original game great. Game
Gutting?
devs, stop randomizing your levels. Give me handcrafted rooms. Give me a thoughtful path to take that is hand-placed enemies. I get that it makes making a game easier. It's a great shortcut, and if used right, can even
Thank
be
you,
a
Yarzi.
benefit to your
Thank you.
overall vision. But if
We're
you are
almost
gonna use
done. The video is
proximity in
almost
your
done.
game, you better have a really complex and good system to distract your players from noticing that they are playing in an empty box.
What? How are these not empty boxes? The only thing I would say that's not an empty box is it Dreadwall? The Into the Gungeon boss that's like a wall of guns, and it's like a corridor that you run down, and like it's constantly doing bullet hell at you. Does anyone know the name of that boss? That's a good boss.
Walkways, hand-placed enemies. I get this. To end on a bit of a positive
Wallmonger,
note, we are
thank
back
you.
with another indie spotlight. I like to do this on my channel to help smaller indie games get a little more public.
Okay, I think we're just about good. And again, I didn't showcase this to make fun of the YouTuber or even to like troll or anything like that. We just want to react to the content. Everyone's entitled to have their own opinions. Like, we don't necessarily have to be in agreement with the opinion. And I'm not picking them apart saying that they're wrong and stuff like that. All I'm saying is that this box can't be any worse than this box. That's all. Is that wrong? I'm just looking at two apples. Maybe like a not citrus. Maybe like a Granny Smith and a Red Delicious. Though I'm sure if you put both together, you would make a very, very good pie. All right, that was our react content for the day. I talk a lot. It's hard for me to get like one react within like 20 minutes. We'll figure out how to cut that up for YouTube. I'll probably not put this up on YouTube. Yo, Primer, good to see you. Again, my apologies if I missed any chat. I was kind of blabbing. It happens sometimes, it happens. Name of that hydration. We will be loading up Dead Cells. We have a normal game to play, which is going